Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I was looking at the readings today, and today's readings are about facing the darkness of our lives with a tremendous sense of faithfulness. They're about the preservation of the Davidic kingdom when every visible sign of hope seemed lost, about human hearts that either treasure God or drift towards spiritual blindness, about reconciliation, preserving the covenant bond we have with God. So if you look at the first reading, 2 Kings 11, verse 1 to 20, there are a few jumps here and there, but that's largely it. It places us within one of the darkest chapters in all of Judah's history. You've got Athaliah. She's the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Through her, the poison of Baal worship entered so deeply into the southern kingdom that when her son Ahaziah died, she attempted something astonishing. She sought to exterminate the entire royal line of David. And the reason she did this was she knew full well exactly what the divine prophecy was about the line of David. Now, that seems like a political coup, but within the biblical narrative, this is significantly more serious. God swore the oath to David. His throne would endure forever. So this woman is trying to make it so that God couldn't fulfill the promise he made. Because if the Davidic line perished, the covenant promises concerning the Messiah would also perish as well. So the drama here then centers upon one single individual. A woman named Jehosheba. She secretly rescues a young boy named Joash, and she hides him within the temple for 6 years. The Hebrew name Yoash, Yahweh has given. Even his name proclaims a kind of divine preservation, not just for himself, but all of Israel. Ancient Jewish readers would have recognized the pattern immediately. Moses survived Pharaoh's slaughter of Hebrew infants. Joash now survives Athaliah's massacre. Just as Israel passed through death towards a life renewed in covenant, so now this Davidic heir is passing through death in concealment towards the restoration of not just himself to the throne, but all of Israel. And so the temple becomes a sanctuary and also the place of the preservation of the covenant. Archaeological studies of the First Temple period reveal to us that the temple complex functioned as a religious and administrative center. So Joash's protection here within the sacred precincts, it symbolizes something deeply profound. God is promising to remain secure within God's dwelling place. He is trying to make sure that his covenant promises will be upheld at the temple. And that imagery is crucial. When the 7th year arrives, Jehoiada orchestrates the king's coronation. And number 7, we all know it signifies covenant, blessing, shavah, divine action, making the mundane holy. Well, the enthronement scene recalls Near Eastern royal ceremonies. The scriptures emphasize something unique, though. The king is crowned only after the covenant has been renewed. In fact, if you look at 2 Kings 11:17, then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord as one party and the king and the people as the other. Notice the order. The covenant is written to precede national restoration. And so what do the people do? They destroy the temple of Baal. They execute its priests. This is more than political reform here. The purpose of this is liturgical purification for all of Israel. Israel is being called to return to their life in faithfulness in God. And so the city rejoices. Divine order has been restored. You look at Psalm 132 after the first reading, that theme gets deepened because the psalm recalls God's oath to David. Your own offspring I will set upon your throne. Psalm 132:11. That Hebrew word for oath, we all know the shavuah, a derivative of shavah. It's a solemn covenant oath, a pledge. God binds himself to his shavah, his promises. So when you see the number 7, to seven oneself is to oath oneself. It's to covenant oneself. And so God is effectively saying, I will covenant myself. I solemnly covenant myself that your own offspring I will set upon your throne. The psalm repeatedly focused on Mount Zion. In Jewish theology, Zion represented the meeting place between heaven and earth. Rabbinic tradition actually describes Zion as the spiritual center of creation. But the psalm here points beyond earthly Jerusalem, the promise of a future Davidic ruler. It remains alive throughout the Second Temple period. Texts from Qumran actually show intense expectation for a coming messianic son of David, and that expectation reaches fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ. The Catechism 436 teaches, Jesus fulfilled the messianic hope of Israel in his threefold office of priest, prophet, and king. Joash survives so that David's line can continue, and David's line continues so that the Messiah might be born of him. Every covenant promise converges eventually upon the person of Jesus Christ. You look at the gospel, Matthew 6:19-23, and you shift away from this language of royal preservation to what this looks like for personally living the covenant in discipleship. And the theme is faithfulness in the covenant. Jesus talks about the treasure, the Greek word thesauros, the treasure storehouse, the repository. In Jewish thought, the heart always follows what one values most deeply. And so Christ declares, where your treasure is, so will your heart be also. And the heart in biblical theology, the Hebrew word lev, it's not just the seat of the emotions as we think. No, it's the intellect, the will, the affection, the moral decision. Jesus is addressing the deepest orientation of the entire human person and saying your heart must be wrapped up in God. Now, you go back to the figure of Athaliah. She treasured her power and influence. Jehoiada, however, treasured God's covenant. And so Joash inherits this kingdom that's preserved through the faithfulness to the covenant. That contrast emerges very quickly in the readings. So you go back to Jesus then, and he speaks about the eye. The Greek term haplos, it's translated as sound, if your eye is sound. It conveys wholeness, generosity, singleness of purpose. A healthy eye sees reality correctly. A corrupted eye distorts everything. In Jewish wisdom literature, as Jesus said this, everyone knew what he was referring to. The eye was the spiritual perception of the human person. A person with an evil eye viewed reality through selfishness and greed. A person with a good eye viewed life through trust in God. And so Christ teaches that spiritual blindness begins internally before it manifests as spiritual evil externally. Now, this connects beautifully if you did your Office of the Readings today, or if you saw it. St. Cyprian's reflection from the Office of the Readings. He insists that reconciliation and forgiveness are essential conditions of authentic prayer. God desires unity amongst his covenant people, and so Cyprian writes, our peace and concord are the greatest possible sacrifice to God. And that teaching echoes Christ's own command concerning forgiveness. Athaliah brought division and death in Israel. Jehoiada tried to restore covenant communion. You go back to the scriptures, Abel offered sacrifice from a righteous heart. Cain cultivated resentment that erupted into murder. That pattern of this back and forth, unfortunately, will repeat throughout salvation history for as long as there are people who don't want to live faithfully in the covenant. And so all these readings compel you and I to seriously examine our hearts. What treasure occupies our deepest affection? What rival loyalties do we have within us for our devotion? What resentments do we have that remain unsolved? Or what spiritual blindness is clouding the way we live spiritually? God preserved the Davidic heir through 6 years of danger because he intended to bring forth Jesus Christ. God preserves his people through trials because he remains faithful to his promises, even when we don't. So let's place the treasure of our hearts firmly at the foot of the cross and in the hands of Jesus Christ. And let's seek reconciliation with God first, and then with each other to the extent that that's even possible. But most of all, let's guard our hearts from sin, renew our covenant daily with the Lord. And we do this primarily by prayer. So please, let's have a life of prayer with the Lord. Let's fix our eyes upon Jesus, the true Son of David, and the eternal King, whose throne will never fail, because every covenant reaches its fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ, and through him and for him forever. Stay tuned, I'm Marcus Peter.